Entitled Mom Calls Me Greedy While She Takes Our Wedding Gifts. So for the story, we have me, my wife, father-in-law equals my wife's father, mother-in-law equals my wife's entitled mother, sister-in-law equals wife's sister. Info I know will be asked. I and my wife paid for the wedding ourselves, no one else. Mother-in-law helped with putting marzipan on the cakes as sister-in-law did the cakes, but she didn't feel so good at some point because of a medical condition. By the way, I don't blame her and she is not at fault for any of this, so I and wife had to make the decor and the fillings of the cakes. Some context: I, 24, and my now wife, 21, recently got married. Kinda small wedding with about 25 guests attending, although it was supposed to be around 35 guests, but some were unable to attend last minute, mostly close family and friends. We had help from one of the guests with buying and preparing the food and also do the cooking at the wedding, grilled. As the guest works as a head chef/kitchen manager and does catering from time to time, she offered to help us with this and the only thing we had to do was pay for the groceries. All the time preparing, cooking and planning was her and her fiancé's wedding gift to us. Would have cost between $1,000 and $1,500 if we hired her instead. She planned the meal so there would be enough for 40 people to make sure it was enough for the initial 35, meaning a lot of leftovers now. This story begins the day before the wedding when father-in-law informs us that he doesn't want to attend. He had been weary if he wanted to attend to show support or if that was too much even. Note, we wanted to know who would attend 2 months prior. But mother-in-law and sister-in-law would attend. So they finished the last stuff for the cakes, and arrived. Sister-in-law was a bridesmaid so she did her part during the ceremony. Mother-in-law showed minimal support throughout the whole ceremony, the only person to not shed a single tear during the entire time, although it was very emotional. Even the wedding officiant and guests cried a bit because it was very beautiful and emotional. But not mother-in-law. After dinner was finished, the cake had been eaten and mingle time was at the end for guests not sleeping there. It was time for mother-in-law and sister-in-law to leave as well. Mother-in-law asks to get some of the leftovers so that sister-in-law could have some lunch tomorrow. She said she would pack up the unopened meat, sauces and dressings and put the sauces in smaller containers so it was less for us to fix tomorrow. Wife said of course because it seemed reasonable, but I was more skeptical since this seemed very out of place for how she had acted during this whole event. I asked why they would bring them back to town. We live 2 minutes apart from them, and the wedding was 45 minutes away. Mother-in-law said that they have a cooler because they brought the cake so if they brought the unused food it wouldn't spoil. I double-checked with her and was clear she understood that it was only transporting it, we would still be taking most of the food home. Mother-in-law said of course she understood. They left and not much more happened until the day after. My wife dropped me off at our place and we started unloading everything. While I sorted where they should go and unpacked all gifts and clothes, my wife picked up the sauce containers from their apartment that sister-in-law had prepared. Mother-in-law had gone out to their caravan again. When sister-in-law returned with just the sauce, I asked where the rest of the stuff was. She said mother-in-law must have forgotten it in the cooler and brought it to the caravan. We didn't think more about it at that point since we still had plenty of leftovers that had to be eaten first anyway. Fast forward to yesterday when all hell broke loose. My wife was supposed to drive sister-in-law somewhere the next day. We usually borrow one of their cars to do this. We pay for the gas and ask first if it is okay to borrow. We still hadn't gotten the meat from mother-in-law, so my wife texted her and the following conversation ensued. Wife, did you take the meat to the caravan? Mother-in-law, yes wife, have you eaten it? Mother-in-law, no wife, could I bring it back home tomorrow when I drive sister-in-law? Mother-in-law, why? Wife, because we want it. Mother-in-law, fine, you can leave the car and garage keys at home. You don't need to borrow the car anymore. We'll come and get sister-in-law ourselves, putting the meat in the fridge. Wife, wow. So just because we want the meat back that we paid for, I don't get to borrow the car anymore? I never said you could have the meat or that you could bring it to the caravan. You only had it because you had a cooler, so it wouldn't spoil. Mother-in-law, exactly. I think it's very greedy of you two to not gift us the meat. I thought you meant I could keep it. Think about all we have given you two during your relationship. We have a limit too, you know. Wife writes again about how it was a wedding gift and apologizes if they misunderstood each other. She mentions that my parents didn't take anything from the wedding and didn't even ask. She also said that I even double-checked so mother-in-law understood that the unopened food was not theirs to keep. Mother-in-law then calls her but I answer instead because my wife was crying at that point. Mother-in-law demands to speak to my wife but I inform her that she is not fit for a call right now but she is listening if there was anything important. Mother-in-law just says to have my wife call back when she can, then starts up the argument about the food again. Mother-in-law, we took the unopened food because we could see that you two wouldn't be able to eat all of it before it got spoiled. It was very greedy of you to not let us have it. Me, we didn't plan to keep all of it ourselves, but it is a wedding gift. We get to decide who should get what since there are a lot of other guests at the wedding who have also supported us through our relationship. It's not only about the food but also it's a matter of principle to not take others' wedding gifts without permission because it's very rude. Mother-in-law, well, ask wife to call us when she can. Bye. I calmed my wife down and walked the dog. Then I wrote a long text to mother-in-law to summarize the whole ordeal and to give her more perspective. After 14 hours, I still have not gotten an answer back nor has my wife. Me, hi, I'll try to get wife to call you tomorrow so you can talk. Regarding the food, we wanted to keep it ourselves and then distribute it to others later. It is vacuum sealed and as long as it stays frozen, it will keep a long time. We had planned to give most of it to one of my best men who had to leave before the food was served. He is also couch surfing because he lost his job and only just started a new one, hasn't gotten paid yet. Instead of being able to gift this meat to someone in need, You have half your freezer stuffed with our meat without permission, somehow feeling more entitled to it. That's why we got mad, not because we are greedy. We seem to have a very different perception of what greed is. So if you or her dad have any problem with this ordeal, then scold me, instead of wife, since I will be less bothered about it. I hope this gives a little more perspective about this. This was the end of events for now until we picked up the meat and if my wife decides to call mother-in-law.